After my surgery, I couldn't walk for weeks. My husband's brother shouted, "She's dead weight," and dumped my wheelchair into the trash. My husband said, "You should be grateful we're still feeding you." That night, I crawled to my phone and made one call that would. I'm 43 and live in a small house just outside Columbus, Ohio. I used to be a nurse, an ICU night shift nurse for 15 years. I was good at it. I made decent money and I was proud of the work I did. It was exhausting, but I loved caring for people, especially when they were at their worst. Now, I can barely take care of myself. 3 months ago, I had back surgery. I'd injured my spine at work moving a patient. It wasn't the first time I'd tweaked something, but this one was different. MRI showed my L4 and L5 discs were bulging and pressing hard on the nerves. I was in constant pain, couldn't sleep, couldn't walk, and eventually lost feeling in my left leg. The surgeon said I needed decompression and a fusion. I agreed because I didn't have another choice. I wanted my life back. I assumed Mark, my husband, would be there for me. We'd been married 9 years. Not perfect years, but we'd gotten through a lot. He wasn't ambitious. He'd had more jobs than I could count: garage tech, Uber driver, Amazon warehouse, crypto day trading. Nothing ever stuck. I was the one paying the bills, keeping food on the table, and paying the mortgage. But I never threw that in his face. I just wanted a partner. The first week after surgery, he tried. He really did. He set up a little area in the living room where I could rest and recover. He brought me soup and helped me to the bathroom. But by the end of week 2, something changed. The meals stopped coming. The help with bathing? Gone. He started sleeping in the bedroom again and left me alone on the couch every night. I asked him for help one morning just to get to the toilet, and he snapped, "You're not a baby, figure it out." Then came Kyle. Kyle is Mark's older brother, 46, divorced twice, no job, drinks too much, says whatever he wants. He asked to crash for a few weeks because he'd been kicked out of his apartment. Mark didn't even ask me, just told me he was staying. I couldn't argue. I couldn't even walk. That first night Kyle moved in, he looked at me lying there on the couch, shook his head and said, "Damn, you really went and got crippled, huh?" He laughed like it was a joke. I didn't laugh. I just turned away. Within days, he made it his mission to make me feel like trash. He'd walk through the living room, burp, fart, and toss dirty socks on the floor like it was his space. He started drinking more, yelling at the TV, blasting music. One night, I heard them talking in the kitchen. Kyle said, "She's dead weight. What's the point of keeping her around?" Mark replied, "You think I don't know that? She hasn't done anything for weeks. But I don't know what else to do." Kyle laughed. Trash takes itself out eventually. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of wheels scraping on the floor. My wheelchair, the one the hospital had delivered. Kyle had picked it up and was pushing it toward the front door. I asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "Making space." I said, "Put it back." He turned and said, "You don't need it. You just sit in it like a slug. It's depressing. It's going in the trash." Then he did it. He took it outside, opened the lid on the garbage can, and shoved it in. I could hear the metal twist and the seat snap. I just stared. When Mark came home, I told him what happened. He didn't even look surprised. He stood in the doorway and said, "You should be grateful we're still feeding you." I didn't respond. Not at first. I waited until they left that night. They always went to the bar around 9 p.m. I knew they'd be gone for hours. That night, I dragged myself across the floor. The phone had slipped behind the side table days earlier, and no one had bothered to pick it up for me. My elbows hurt. My knees scraped against the floor. Every inch forward felt like a mile. But I got to it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just called my sister Melissa. We hadn't talked much in recent years. She never liked Mark. She told me he was using me. I called her controlling back then. We stopped talking. She picked up on the second ring. All I said was, "I need help. I don't know what to do, but I can't stay here." She didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'm coming. Don't move. Don't talk to them. I'll be there in the morning." And she was. Melissa showed up just after 5 a.m. She didn't knock. She walked right in. She found me on the couch, unwashed, shaking, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like mold. She didn't say a word at first, just came over, sat next to me, and took my hand. After a minute, she said, "We're getting you out of here." She helped me into the only thing I could wear, an old sweatshirt and loose pajama pants. I couldn't stand on my own, so she dragged one of the dining chairs over, helped me onto it, and rolled me toward the front door like I was a sack of groceries. We didn't speak much. She was focused. I was numb. As we were leaving, Mark and Kyle pulled into the driveway. I could see them through the front window. Mark stumbled out first, clearly drunk, and when he saw Melissa, his face twisted. "What the hell are you doing here?" he slurred. Melissa didn't flinch. "She's leaving." Mark stepped inside and said, "She's not going anywhere. This is her house." Melissa snapped, "Not anymore. You gave that up the minute you started treating her like garbage." Kyle followed behind him, smirking, holding a half-empty beer can. "Let her go. Less whining around here." Melissa turned to me and whispered, "Can you walk at all?" I said, "No," without hesitating. She walked up to Mark and said, "Get the hell out of her way, or I will make a scene big enough that your parole officer hears about it." That froze him. She knew. She always kept receipts, always knew things I didn't bother remembering. Mark had a DUI a few years back. I paid for the lawyer. I drove him to court. But Melissa? She remembered everything. They stepped aside. We left. She drove me to her place in Worthington. Clean, quiet, safe. She gave me her spare bedroom and started calling in favors. Within 2 days, I had a new doctor, a social worker, and a legal aid contact. I didn't know it at the time, but Melissa had already started the process to get me back on my feet, not just physically, but legally too. She helped me file for separation. We pulled the bank statements. I realized that while I was drugged up after surgery, Mark had been using my debit card to take out cash almost daily, $100 here, $200 there. My savings were nearly gone. He drained my checking account down to $300. Melissa also discovered something worse. Mark had been telling people I was mentally unstable. He told my old coworkers that I was paranoid, possibly having delusions from medication. When HR called to check in on me, he said I was too confused to talk. He was laying the groundwork to take power of attorney over me. That lit a fire in me. For weeks, Melissa helped me get stronger. She hired a physical therapist to come to the house. We got a used wheelchair from a friend. I started making progress. But I also started documenting everything, texts from Mark, receipts, even a voice memo Melissa recorded during one of his drunken voicemails. All of it. Then one day, I got a call from the county. A welfare check had been filed against me. Someone. Guess who claimed I was being held against my will by my controlling sister. They sent a sheriff's deputy to the house. I showed him the medical paperwork. The therapist confirmed my recovery plan. Melissa stayed calm. The deputy looked embarrassed. "We get a lot of false reports," he said. "Sorry to bother you." That's when I knew I couldn't just leave this behind. I had to finish it. Mark had taken my money, my health, my pride. And now he was trying to destroy my name. But he didn't know what was coming next. I had a plan. And this time, I wasn't alone. 2 weeks after the welfare check, I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from Mark's lawyer. Inside was a formal notice. Mark was filing for divorce. In it, he claimed that I had abandoned the marital home without cause, was mentally unstable, and had become combative and irrational under the care of her sister. He wanted the house, the remaining savings, which he had already drained, and this floored me, spousal support. He was asking the court to order me to pay him alimony. I sat there holding the letter, shaking. Melissa took it out of my hand, read it, and said, "This guy just picked the wrong war." That same day, we called her lawyer, a woman named Val. Older, sharp, no patience for bullies. We met with her 2 days later, and I laid out everything, what happened before and after my surgery, the verbal abuse, the financial theft, the false welfare claim, the wheelchair. Val didn't flinch. "Let's talk about restraining orders," she said. "And while we're at it, let's make sure he never touches a cent of your money again." The twist? Mark had opened a credit card in my name right after surgery. We found out when I pulled my credit report. There were charges to places I'd never been: liquor stores, gas stations, and online sports betting. He'd maxed out the card in less than a month. Almost $6,000. That changed everything. We now had grounds not just for divorce, but for criminal fraud. Val filed a police report and froze my credit. Then she filed a motion to challenge his divorce claims and included affidavits from my doctor, physical therapist, and Melissa, all swearing to the abuse and neglect I had endured. But the biggest twist came from an unexpected place: my old job. One of my former coworkers, Sarah, reached out. She said something didn't sit right with her about the way Mark had been answering my phone. She had a bad feeling. She told me that during those first 2 weeks after my surgery, Mark had called in pretending to be me, told them I'd had a mental breakdown and wouldn't be returning. When they asked for a doctor's note, he sent them a forged one. She had a copy. That was the nail in the coffin. We now had identity fraud, forged documents, and financial abuse on paper. Val contacted his lawyer with a blunt message: withdraw the divorce demands, or we pursue full criminal charges. His lawyer backed off fast. But Mark didn't. Instead, he showed up at Melissa's house one afternoon, pounding on the door, screaming that I had ruined his life, that I was faking everything and milking sympathy. Melissa called the police before I even rolled to the hallway. When the squad car pulled up, Mark was still shouting on the lawn. The officer asked him to leave. He refused, said it was his wife's house. The cop corrected him. "You don't live here. You're trespassing." He got arrested. That was the first time I felt it: control. Not full revenge yet, but power. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one being dragged down.
He was.
But I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play. One that would humiliate him in a way he'd never see coming. Mark's arrest didn't last long. Trespassing and disturbing the peace don't carry much weight when the person yelling swears it's just a misunderstanding. He was released the same night. But the damage was done. Now there was a police report. A second one, technically, if you counted the welfare check stunt he tried to pull. His name was in the system. 2 days later, I got a text from Kyle. I hadn't heard from him since I left. It said, "You really trying to ruin my brother? After everything he did for your crippled ass? You think anyone's gonna want a broken down husk like you? Good luck alone." I showed it to Val, our lawyer. She told me to block him and that she'd filed to include harassment in the restraining order. But that wasn't the part that got to me. It was the alone part. Because for the first time, I realized they'd assumed I had no one. No friends, no support system, no options. That was their mistake. They thought taking away my mobility took away my voice. But I'd been slowly rebuilding behind the scenes. I was talking to my old nursing board. I'd started filing the paperwork to reactivate my license once I was medically cleared. Melissa helped me get into online therapy, part of the legal strategy, but also something I actually needed. I started journaling everything. Not just what they did, but how I felt when it happened. That record was power. It became my memory when the trauma blurred things together. Then came another twist. Mark's second ex-girlfriend, someone I barely knew but had met once at a cookout years ago, messaged me on Facebook. She said, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I saw what he posted, and I want you to know you're not the only one he's done this to." What had he posted? I checked. He'd made a private Facebook post, visible only to certain people. It read, "My wife ran off with her sister and is trying to take me down. If anything happens to me, just know it's because I tried to help her and she went nuts." There were comments from a handful of his drinking buddies, guys who barely knew me. Things like, "She always seemed ungrateful," and "You were too good for her anyway." But one comment stood out. From Kyle. "Try to help her? Bro, you carried her. She was dead F******, ing wait. Asterisk, that was it. I screen capped the whole thread.
Sent it to Val. Sent it to the sheriff. Sent it to HR at my old job.
And quietly, I sent it to the landlord who rented the house to Mark. Yes, I found out he'd taken out a HELOC loan using my income and credit before the surgery. And now he was months behind on payments. Melissa and I decided it was time to stop waiting. We started calling every single place he owed money to: utilities, bank, the credit card company with the fraudulent charges, and sent them documentation. Let them know the responsible party was Mark.
Not me.
And then came the final piece. Sarah, my old coworker, invited me to speak at a hospital conference panel on patient care and recovery. She said my story might help other caregivers understand what post-op neglect really looks like. She didn't know it yet, but I planned to tell the whole story. No names, but enough truth that anyone who knew us would connect the dots. And Mark? He still had no idea I was rebuilding something bigger than he could destroy. The day of the panel came 3 weeks later. Melissa wheeled me in, but I stood on my own when it was time to speak. Slowly, shaky at first, but I stood. That mattered to me. I told the room everything. What it's like to be vulnerable in your own home, how trust can rot under the weight of control, and how easy it is for someone to go from husband to captor when you can't get off the floor. I didn't use Mark's name. I didn't have to. Word traveled fast. Someone recorded it. It made its way onto a local nursing Facebook group. Then to a community news site. Former ICU nurse shares harrowing story of abuse during recovery, sparks legal discussion. The attention lit a fire. That's when the sheriff's investigator called. Said they were moving forward on the credit fraud charges. Mark had signed my name on 2 loan applications, both traceable to his IP address and his bank account. That alone carried felony weight. The forged doctor's note? That added another count. They issued a warrant. This time, he didn't just get a warning. They arrested him at the house. Melissa and I drove by that day just once. I watched them lead him out in cuffs. He saw me from the back seat of the patrol car. He looked stunned, like the house itself had turned against him. 2 weeks later, Kyle was evicted. Mark hadn't paid the mortgage in months. The HELOC he'd taken out using my credit? That came due. The bank seized the property. Melissa's lawyer helped me untangle myself from the loan. I signed an affidavit showing I was incapacitated at the time it was filed. They opened a fraud investigation. The house was repossessed and listed for sale. Neither of them saw a penny. The court case took a while, but I didn't stop. I testified in the financial abuse hearing. So did Melissa. So did my therapist, my doctor, and even a social worker the hospital had sent to check on me. Mark pled guilty to avoid prison. He got 3 years probation, was ordered to repay $17,600 in restitution, and was legally barred from contacting me or using my name for anything, ever. But I wasn't done. I filed a civil suit. Val helped me every step of the way. We sued for emotional distress, medical neglect, and financial exploitation of a disabled adult. I wasn't even sure I'd win, but I did. The judge awarded me $68,000. Most of it will come in slow payments, but I don't care. Every month he'll feel it. Every check he writes will remind him I got back up. Kyle? Last I heard, he was living in his truck. No one wants him around. I went back to work last month, part-time, easing in. The hospital welcomed me. They'd followed my case. They knew the truth. The best revenge wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the court win. It was this: when someone tries to reduce you to nothing and you come back, louder, stronger, and impossible to ignore, that's the blow that lasts. He tried to make me disappear. Now, every time someone Googles his name, my story shows up first. And that's how I made sure he never forgets me. Not the version he tried to break, but the one who took everything back.